Our names are Daniel and David Garrett, and we need to tell you what we discovered after 20 years of protecting something we thought we understood. We're 71 years old now, retired park rangers who spent our entire careers at a remote station in the Rocky Mountains, identical twins who chose the same profession, requested the same assignment, lived the same isolated life in service of protecting wilderness. And for 20 years, from 1987 to 2007, we sheltered a Bigfoot, gave him sanctuary in an abandoned fire lookout tower on the edge of our patrol territory, brought him food, protected him from hunters and researchers, kept his existence secret from everyone including our own agency. We thought we were doing the right thing, thought we were protecting an intelligent being who deserved safety and privacy, thought the relationship we'd built over 2 decades was based on mutual trust and understanding. We were wrong. Catastrophically, terrifyingly wrong. Because in 2007 we discovered what he'd really been doing during those 20 years. What he'd been preparing, what he'd been planning, and what we'd unknowingly helped him accomplish. The revelation didn't just terrify us, it made us realize that everything we thought we knew about his species, about their intelligence, about their relationship with humanity, was a comfortable lie hiding a truth so dark we've spent 16 years trying to convince ourselves we misunderstood. But we didn't misunderstand. We found the evidence, documented it, and now we're releasing it because the world needs to know. Bigfoot isn't hiding from humans because they're shy or primitive. They're hiding because they're planning something. And we helped one of them prepare for 20 years without knowing it. We were 35 years old in 1987 when we first met him, fresh from forestry school, assigned to one of the most remote ranger stations in the Rockies. A 2-person outpost responsible for monitoring 400 square miles of wilderness. Perfect assignment for identical twins who'd always been more comfortable with each other than with other people. We'd spent our whole lives being a unit, finished each other's sentences, worked in perfect synchronization, preferred isolation to socializing. The ranger station was ideal. Just the 2 of us, the forest, and the occasional hiker or hunter passing through. We found him, or he found us, 3 months into our assignment. September 1987. We were on routine patrol, checking trails after an early snowfall when we saw tracks. Enormous tracks, bipedal, fresh, leading toward an abandoned fire lookout tower that hadn't been used in decades. We followed them. Not because we believed in Bigfoot. We didn't, not really. But because something large was using Forest Service property, and we needed to assess if it posed a danger. He was waiting in the tower when we arrived, standing at the top of the stairs, 9 feet tall, maybe 800 pounds, covered in dark brown fur going gray at the temples. He could have run, could have hidden. Instead he waited, made eye contact, and spoke. Not in English, in a language we didn't know but somehow partially understood through tone and gesture. He was asking for something, requesting something. The meaning was clear even without words. I need sanctuary. I need protection. I need your help. We should have reported it. Should have called our supervisors, contacted wildlife officials, done something official. But we looked at those intelligent eyes, at the obvious consciousness behind them, at the clear plea for help, and we made a choice. We decided to help, to keep his existence secret, to provide sanctuary. We tell no one, Daniel said. It was the first of many decisions we'd make together over 20 years. We protect him, David agreed. Whatever he needs. That was the beginning of a relationship we thought was built on trust. The beginning of 20 years of regular visits to that fire tower, bringing food and supplies, learning rudimentary communication, believing we were doing something noble, something right, protecting an intelligent being from a world that would exploit or destroy him. He learned English over the first 5 years, started with simple words, progressed to basic sentences, eventually could communicate complex ideas. We learned his language too, or what he taught us of it. Enough to have conversations, enough to think we understood him. His name, as close as we could pronounce it, was something like Sequa. It meant one who waits in his language, though we didn't fully understand the significance of that name until much later. He told us his history, how his people had lived in these mountains for thousands of years, how they'd watched humans expand and develop, how they'd learned to hide more carefully as human technology improved, how he was old Over 90 years, he claimed, and tired of running. How he wanted a safe place to spend his remaining years. How he'd chosen our territory because it was remote, because we seemed kind, because he sensed we might help rather than hurt. We believed all of it, why wouldn't we? He seemed genuine, seemed grateful, seemed like exactly what he claimed to be, an elderly being seeking peaceful retirement in a safe location. We brought him books, newspapers, magazines, tried to help him understand modern human society since he'd been hiding in deep wilderness for decades. He was fascinated by everything, asked countless questions about technology, politics, population, infrastructure. We thought he was just curious, just trying to understand the world he'd avoided for so long. He asked us about the ranger station, about our duties, about emergency protocols, about communication systems, about what would happen if there was a major incident in our territory. Fire, avalanche, major accident. We explained everything. Thought we were just answering natural questions from someone trying to understand how humans managed wilderness. Thought his interest was academic. He asked us about population centers, about cities near the national forest, about how many people lived in surrounding areas, about evacuation routes, about emergency response times. We showed him maps, explained everything. Thought he was just trying to understand human geography, trying to know where to avoid, where the danger zones were. For 20 years, we answered every question, brought every item he requested, provided every piece of information he wanted, thought we were helping, thought we were protecting, thought we were building friendship across species. And then in September 2007, exactly 20 years after our first meeting, we arrived at the tower for our monthly visit and found it empty. He was gone. No note, no goodbye, no explanation, just gone. And in the tower, hidden under floorboards we'd never noticed were removable, we found what he'd been doing for 20 years. Found what he'd been building, what he'd been planning, what we'd helped him accomplish without knowing. The revelation destroyed us, made us understand that we hadn't been protectors. We'd been tools, useful idiots who'd provided intelligence and resources to someone with intentions we'd never suspected, never imagined, never wanted to believe possible. What we found in that tower terrified us, still terrifies us, and it's why we're telling the story now, 16 years later, before we die without warning anyone about what's coming. The tower looked normal at first glance, same as it had looked for 20 years. Same rough furniture Sequa had assembled from scavenged materials, same sleeping area in the corner, same basic setup we'd seen hundreds of times during our monthly visits. But he was gone, and something felt wrong. The air felt wrong. The space felt wrong. Like something had shifted in a way we couldn't immediately identify. Check everything, Daniel said. We'd developed that twin instinct even more strongly over our careers, could sense when the other was uneasy, could communicate concerns without full sentences. We searched systematically, checked shelves, looked through the few possessions Sequa had accumulated, found nothing unusual at first. Books we'd brought him, well read, annotated in his language. Maps we'd provided, marked with notes we couldn't read. Newspapers and magazines from 20 years of monthly deliveries, organized chronologically, certain articles circled or highlighted. David was checking the floor, knocking on boards, testing for hollow sounds. Here, he said, this section sounds different. We pried up the floorboards. Not difficult. They'd been modified to lift easily, though we'd never noticed. And underneath, in a space maybe 4 feet by 6 feet, we found his archive. His actual work. What he'd been doing for 20 years while we thought he was just living peacefully in retirement. Maps, dozens of maps. Topographical maps of the entire region. Population density maps. Infrastructure maps. Maps showing power grids, water systems, communication networks. Maps with routes marked in red. Maps with locations circled. Maps with timing notes written in his language and in English. Documents. Photocopies of ranger protocols we'd shown him over the years. Emergency response procedures. Evacuation routes. Contact information for local authorities. Schedules for when the ranger station was staffed versus unstaffed. Patterns of patrol routes we followed. Everything we'd casually shared, now meticulously documented. Notebooks, filled with observations. Written in English, surprisingly fluent English for someone we'd thought was just learning the language over the years. The entries went back to 1987. The very first one read, "Made contact with twin rangers, young, naive, eager to help, perfect subjects, will cultivate relationship, will extract needed intelligence over time. They will trust me because I appear grateful and harmless, will use their protective instincts against them." We stared at that entry for a long time, felt sick, felt stupid, felt violated in a way we'd never experienced. We hadn't been protectors, we'd been marks, targets of a 20-year intelligence-gathering operation, more notebooks, detailed observations about human behavior, human society, human vulnerabilities, analysis of our infrastructure, notes about dependencies, power grids that serve millions, water systems with single points of failure, communication networks that could be disrupted. He'd been studying us, learning our weaknesses, identifying targets. "Look at this," Daniel said, his voice shaking. He'd found a larger notebook, a planning document, written in careful English with diagrams and timelines. The title page read, "Coordinated Response Implementation Timeline." We read it together, read it twice to make sure we understood. Felt our blood run cold. It was a plan. A detailed, sophisticated, terrifying plan for a coordinated attack. Not just by Sasquatch, by his people, multiple groups, multiple locations, simultaneous actions designed to cause maximum disruption, with minimal detection until it was too late to respond effectively. The plan identified critical infrastructure across the western United States, power stations, water treatment facilities, communication hubs, specifically, infrastructure located in remote areas, near forests, near mountains, near places where his people could operate undetected. The plan detailed how small groups could disable or destroy these facilities using nothing but physical strength and basic tools. No technology required, no sophisticated weapons, just intelligence and coordination. Target date was marked, winter 2008, peak vulnerability, maximum impact. "This isn't possible," David said. "One individual planning this? It's not one individual," I said, finding another section. "Look, he's got contact protocols, communication methods. He's been coordinating with others. This is bigger than him. He was just one cell, one intelligence gatherer, and we fed him everything he needed." The notebooks detailed other operatives, at least 15 that Sasquatch knew of, each assigned to different regions, each cultivating relationships with humans, not always rangers, sometimes hunters, hikers, landowners, anyone who could provide useful information and could be manipulated into helping. Each gathering intelligence about their assigned region, each preparing for coordinated action. We found correspondence, not letters, nothing that traceable, but meeting notes. Sasquatch had been leaving the tower occasionally, times when we hadn't been scheduled to visit, meeting with others of his kind, sharing information, coordinating, building a network. "They're planning an insurgency," Daniel said, "a coordinated attack on human infrastructure, and we helped him prepare for 20 years. "Why?" I asked. "Why would they do this?" We found the answer in his personal journal, a section labeled Justification. It was written in English, clearly intended for us to find and read. His final message to the rangers he'd manipulated: "You wonder why? I will tell you. For thousands of years my people lived in balance with this land, then your kind came, spread like disease, destroyed forests, polluted waters, drove species to extinction, built cities where there should be wilderness, and pushed us to the edge. We are dying. Not from violence. You don't even know we exist enough to hunt us intentionally. We are dying from habitat loss, from pollution, from the constant expansion that leaves us nowhere to live. Your kind won't stop, won't slow down, won't choose sustainability over growth, so we must make you stop. Must create conditions that force human civilization to contract, to collapse enough that wilderness can recover, that we can survive. This is not aggression, this is survival. We gave you centuries to choose balance. You chose destruction. Now we choose for you." We sat in that tower reading his journals until dark, understanding slowly, horrifyingly. He wasn't a gentle elderly being seeking peace. He was a soldier, a spy, an operative in a war we didn't know was being fought, and we'd armed him with intelligence for 20 years. "We have to report this," David said. "Report what? That Bigfoot is planning an insurgency? That we've been harboring an intelligence operative? They'll think we're insane. Or they'll believe us and we'll be prosecuted for providing aid to what? Enemy combatants? Terrorists? What do you even call this? We have to warn someone. If the timeline is right, they're planning to act in winter 2008. That's 1 year from now. People could die." We took everything, every map, every notebook, every document, packed it carefully, carried it back to the ranger station, and spent the next 3 days trying to decide what the hell to do with information no one would believe from sources that officially didn't exist. We tried to report it, tried multiple approaches. Each one failed in different ways, but all ending the same: dismissed, ignored, or actively suppressed. First attempt, our immediate supervisor, Regional Ranger Director. We requested an urgent meeting, told him we'd discovered evidence of a planned attack on Forest Service infrastructure, showed him the maps, the documents, the notebooks, watched his expression shift from concern to confusion to barely concealed contempt. "You're telling me Bigfoot is planning a terrorist attack?" he said flatly. "We're telling you an intelligent species we've been in contact with has been gathering intelligence for 20 years and is planning coordinated sabotage," Daniel said carefully. "Where is this being now? Can you produce him?" "He's gone, left, but the evidence..." "The evidence is notebooks you claim came from Bigfoot. This could be your handwriting, could be a hoax, could be a mental health crisis. I don't know, but I do know I'm not forwarding this up the chain. You're both getting mandatory psychological evaluations. Consider yourselves on administrative leave until cleared." The psychological evaluations were humiliating. Psychiatrists clearly thought we'd had some kind of shared delusion. Twin folie à deux. Asked about stress, isolation, whether we'd been using drugs. We showed him the documents. He suggested we'd created them during a psychotic episode. Suggested that 20 years of isolation had broken us. Recommended we be reassigned to less isolated positions. Second attempt, FBI. We went over our supervisor's head, contacted the FBI field office, requested a meeting about potential domestic terrorism, got an agent who listened politely for 20 minutes before stopping us. "Let me understand. You're reporting that Bigfoot, a cryptid, a creature whose existence isn't scientifically verified, has been planning infrastructure attacks, and your evidence is notebooks and maps that could have come from anywhere. Do you understand how this sounds?" "We understand it sounds insane," I said, "but the evidence is real. The planning is sophisticated, the timeline is specific. Winter 2008. If we're right, people could die. If we investigate every claim from people who think supernatural creatures are plotting against them, we'd have no time for actual threats. I'm going to recommend you speak with mental health professionals, and I'm going to note this conversation in case you become a threat yourselves." That was worse than dismissal. We'd been flagged as potential threats, as unstable individuals who might be planning something ourselves and creating an elaborate cover story involving Bigfoot. Third attempt, we tried going public, contacted journalists, offered the documents, the evidence, exclusive access to the fire tower. Got one reporter interested enough to drive out to our station, showed him everything, watched him take photos, ask questions, act engaged. Then he published an article titled, "Twin Rangers Claim Bigfoot Spy Network Planning Attack." Mocking tone throughout, presented us as cautionary tale about isolation-induced psychosis. The evidence was dismissed as elaborate hoax and concerning delusion. We became jokes, memes, examples of what happens when people spend too long alone in the wilderness. We stopped trying after that, realized that the truth was too absurd, too impossible, too far outside normal human experience to be believed. We had evidence but no credibility, had documentation but no witness, had warnings but no audience willing to listen. So we watched, waited, prepared for winter 2008 with dread and terrible certainty. December 2007. First incidents. Power outage in Oregon affecting 50,000 people. Cause: equipment failure at a remote substation. Investigators found evidence of physical damage but attributed it to equipment malfunction rather than sabotage. January 2008. Water treatment facility in Montana went offline. Serviced 20,000 people. Caused 3-day emergency. Investigators found damaged equipment. Cause officially listed as mechanical failure. But we read the reports, saw the damage patterns, recognized what we were looking at. Damage consistent with immense physical strength applied precisely to critical components. February 2008. Communication tower collapse in Idaho. Took out cell service for entire region. Official cause, structural failure accelerated by winter weather. But the tower hadn't been old, hadn't been damaged, had simply fallen as if something had pushed it over. March 2008. Series of accidents across Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Washington, Oregon. Always remote infrastructure, always critical but not immediately life-threatening. Always explained away as coincidence or mechanical failure. Never investigated as sabotage because who would believe the explanation? We tracked every incident, marked them on maps, saw the pattern that investigators missed because they weren't looking for it. Every incident was near national forest land. Every incident was in territory where Bigfoot sightings had been reported historically. Every incident matched the target list we'd found in Sequa's notebooks. We tried reporting the pattern, contacted same FBI agent, sent detailed analysis showing correlation between incidents and the documents we'd provided months earlier. Got back a form letter thanking us for our continued interest in public safety and suggesting we refrain from further contact. April 2008. The incident stopped. Completely. No more mysterious infrastructure failures. No more unexplained outages. Just stopped. We didn't know if they'd accomplished their goal, if they'd been scared off by something, or if this was just phase 1. We kept monitoring, kept waiting for escalation, but nothing came. The wave of accidents ended as mysteriously as it began. In total, the winter 2008 incidents affected approximately 200,000 people across 5 states. Caused millions in damage, created temporary emergencies in dozens of communities but no deaths. Not directly. A few people died from secondary effects, elderly individuals in homes without power during extreme cold, accidents during evacuations. But nothing that would be officially attributed to sabotage, nothing that would trigger major investigation. Looking at the impact, we realized this wasn't the main attack. This was a test, a proof of concept. A demonstration that they could coordinate across vast distances, could strike critical infrastructure, could cause significant disruption without being detected. They were showing their capability, showing they could do this, showing that if they wanted to escalate, they could. And then they stopped, went quiet, disappeared back into the wilderness, left us knowing what they could do but not knowing when or if they'd do it again. We retired in 2010. Couldn't handle the stress anymore. Couldn't handle knowing what we knew, having evidence no one would believe, watching infrastructure we knew was vulnerable. We moved to a small town far from any national forest, tried to live normal lives, tried to forget. But we couldn't forget. And 16 years later, we're telling this story because we need someone to know, someone to understand, someone to take the threat seriously even if they don't believe the source. We kept everything. Every notebook, every map, every document we found in that fire tower, kept it in a secure location for 16 years waiting for, we didn't know what. Waiting for vindication, for someone to take us seriously, for evidence that we weren't insane. Over the years, we've analyzed the materials obsessively, trying to understand more, trying to find patterns we missed, trying to determine if the threat was ongoing or if 2008 was an isolated incident. What we found was simultaneously more and less disturbing than we'd initially thought. The notebooks revealed sophisticated understanding of human society. Sequa had studied us with anthropological precision, documented our behaviors, our psychology, our social structures, not just infrastructure, culture, values, motivations. What drives human decision-making? What makes us cooperate or conflict? He'd created a profile of humanity that was more insightful than most published sociological research. One section particularly chilled us, titled Human Weakness Analysis. It listed psychological and social vulnerabilities that could be exploited. Humans prioritize short-term comfort over long-term survival. We'll ignore threats that don't feel immediate. We'll dismiss evidence that contradicts desired reality. We'll fracture into competing groups rather than unify against common threat. We'll sacrifice ethics for security when frightened. We'll believe comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths. He'd studied us well, had identified exactly the weaknesses that prevented our warnings from being taken seriously, had predicted that even if we found his plan and tried to warn others, we'd be dismissed. He'd accounted for that, had made us part of his plan, useful during intelligence gathering, neutralized through their own species' incredulity after. The maps were equally revealing. He'd identified infrastructure vulnerabilities with precision that suggested either extensive personal reconnaissance or information sharing among his people. Every target in the 2008 incidents matched locations he'd marked years earlier. The correlation was too exact to be coincidental. But there was more. Many more targets marked that hadn't been hit in 2008. Hundreds of locations across the western United States, each with detailed notes about vulnerabilities, optimal timing for attack, expected impact, secondary effects. This was comprehensive planning on a scale that suggested years or decades of preparation by many individuals. Most disturbing, the notebooks included what appeared to be organizational structure. Not just Sequoia and a few others. A network. Hierarchical, coordinated, with roles assigned. Intelligence gatherers, planners, operators, communicators. He used terminology that suggested military organization, referred to commanders, cells, operations, campaigns. This wasn't ragtag resistance, this was organized insurgency. We found correspondence protocols, methods for communicating across distances without technology, dead drops, sign language using environmental markers, specific arrangements of stones, broken branches, tree markings that looked natural but carried meaning, meeting locations and schedules, encryption methods using their own language that no human could crack because no human had comprehensive knowledge of their linguistic structure. One notebook was entirely dedicated to human helpers, his term for people like us, listed at least 30 individuals across different states, names, locations, occupations, what intelligence they'd provided, whether they'd done so knowingly or unknowingly. Most were unknowing, hikers who'd befriended a gentle forest creature, property owners who'd allowed wildlife to shelter on their land, researchers who'd shared findings thinking they were contributing to conservation. Only a few, like us, seemed to have actively sheltered his people while aware of their intelligence. Next to each name, reliability assessment. Likelihood they'd report if they discovered the truth. Probability they'd be believed if they reported. Risk they posed to operational security. We found our own names. Daniel and David Garrett, twin rangers, highly reliable for intelligence gathering. Zero risk if they discover truth. Will report but won't be believed due to twin delusion diagnosis. Can be safely abandoned after intelligence extraction complete. He'd calculated everything, including our irrelevance. But the most terrifying document was the timeline. Not the 2008 timeline, that was short-term. This was long-term, spanning decades, with phases marked. Phase 1, 1950-2000. Intelligence gathering, infiltrate human proximity, study capabilities, vulnerabilities, infrastructure dependencies, identify critical systems, recruit unwitting helpers, map human expansion, document habitat loss, build case for necessity of action. Phase 2, 2000-2010, network building, establish communication protocols, organize cells, share intelligence across regions, conduct small-scale tests, verify coordination capabilities, assess human response patterns, confirm detection avoidance methods effective. Phase 3, 2010-2030. Preparation, stockpile resources, train operators, refine targets, model cascading effects, wait for optimal conditions, watch for human vulnerability windows, climate stress, political instability, economic strain, social division, strike when humans least capable of unified response. Phase 4, 2030-2050. Implementation, coordinated infrastructure disruption, sustained campaign, force human contraction, create conditions incompatible with industrial civilization, allow wilderness recovery, secure long-term survival of our species. We're currently in Phase 3 according to this timeline. The 2008 incidents were late Phase 2, testing coordination, testing human response, confirming they could act without detection. Phase 4 is still years away, but it's coming. The timeline included target objectives, not just damage infrastructure, fundamentally alter human civilization's trajectory, force collapse of industrial society, cause retreat from wilderness areas, create conditions where their species could survive and repopulate. This wasn't terrorism for political goals. This was strategic population control, ecological warfare on species-threatening species scale. Most chilling, the timeline included probability assessments. Likelihood of human extinction, 15–20%. Likelihood of civilization collapse, 60–70%. Likelihood of significant population reduction, 85–90%. Likelihood of successful wilderness recovery, 95% plus. Acceptable outcomes. Any scenario resulting in 50% plus reduction of human infrastructure footprint and cessation of habitat encroachment. They'd calculated our deaths, run the numbers, decided that killing potentially billions of humans was acceptable if it meant their species' survival and wilderness recovery. This wasn't desperate last stand. This was calculated genocide disguised as conservation. We've shared this evidence with select researchers, anthropologists, wildlife biologists, intelligence analysts, always off record, always deniably. Responses range from fascinating creative writing to concerning psychological fixation to, even if true, what could we do? No one takes it seriously enough to act. No one wants to be the person who officially reports that Bigfoot is planning to collapse human civilization. We're releasing everything now, digitizing the notebooks, photographing the maps, creating online archives that can't be easily suppressed, making sure the evidence exists publicly, even if it's dismissed as hoax or delusion, because Phase 4 is approaching, and we think recent events, the accelerating climate crisis, increasing social division, political instability, are creating exactly the vulnerability window the timeline predicted, the conditions where coordinated infrastructure attacks would be most devastating, where human response would be most fractured, where collapse would be most likely. They're waiting, watching, preparing. And we don't know how to stop something no one believes exists. But here's the truly terrifying part. The revelation that's kept us awake for 16 years. The thing that makes this worse than sophisticated insurgency planning or calculated genocide. The thing we found in the final notebook. The thing that changed everything we thought we understood about Sasquatch's plan. It was a separate journal, hidden differently than the others. Not under the floorboards with the operational documents. Behind a wall panel we almost didn't find, wrapped in waterproof material. Protected more carefully than anything else. We almost left it undiscovered. But David noticed the panel was slightly off, removed it, found the journal. It was older than the others. Pages yellowed. Some entries dating back to the 1960s based on dated references. And it wasn't written by Sasquatch. It was written by many individuals. A collective journal. A multi-generational document passed between members of his species, recording observations, sharing knowledge, building cumulative understanding of humanity across decades. The entries were disturbing in their clarity, in their cold assessment of human nature, in their increasingly dark conclusions about our species. 1962 entry. We observe the humans' capacity for destruction. They have created weapons capable of ending all life. Yet they continue building more, continue threatening use. They claim intelligence yet pursue extinction. This suggests fundamental flaw in human cognition. Intelligence without wisdom. Knowledge without restraint. 1975 entry. We observe human treatment of their own environment. They poison their own water, foul their own air, destroy forests they depend on for oxygen, kill species they depend on for food systems. This is not rational behavior. This is species-level suicide pursued deliberately, despite full knowledge of consequences. 1983 entry. We observe human treatment of other humans. Wars based on invisible boundaries, genocides based on superficial differences, torture, slavery, systematic cruelty, and yet they call themselves civilized, call us animals. The projection is remarkable. They are the most dangerous animals Earth has produced. We are merely surviving their expansion. 1991 entry. We have concluded, humans are an extinction-level threat, not just to us, to all life. They have intelligence sufficient to understand consequences, but insufficient wisdom to change behavior. They have tools sufficient to destroy world but insufficient restraint to choose not to. They are broken at fundamental level. The question is not whether they will cause catastrophic collapse. The question is whether they will take everything else with them when they fall. The entries continued, each more disturbing than the last. Building a case, accumulating evidence, reaching consensus across his species. Humans were irredeemable. Were fundamentally destructive. Were incapable of choosing sustainability over growth. Were doomed to collapse and would destroy most of Earth's life in the process unless stopped. But then we reached entries from the 2000s, Sasquatch entries. And the tone changed, became more specific, more operational, more focused on solution rather than observation. 2003 entry. We have debated for decades. Some believe we should simply hide better, wait for humans to destroy themselves, survive in remaining wilderness until their collapse is complete. Others believe we have moral obligation to accelerate collapse before they trigger irreversible damage, before they poison oceans beyond recovery, before they trigger runaway climate change, before they cause extinction cascades that even their collapse won't reverse. I belong to second group. We must act, not for revenge, not for justice, for preservation of life itself, for the thousands of species that will die if humans continue unchecked. 2005 entry. We have formed consensus among operational faction. We will proceed with infrastructure disruption campaign. We'll force human civilization to contract before it triggers planetary scale tipping points. We'll cause suffering. This is unavoidable. Humans will die. Many humans. But billions more will die if we allow current trajectory to continue. We are choosing lesser evil. We are choosing survival of life over survival of one destructive species. And then the final entry, written in 2007, just before Sasquatch abandoned the tower, just before the 2008 test campaign. I have completed intelligence gathering. The Twin Rangers have provided everything needed. They believed they were protecting me. They were. But they were also arming me with knowledge I needed to protect everyone else. They are good individuals, kind, compassionate. They represent the best of what humans can be. And that is precisely why we must act. Because even the best humans, the kindest, most well-intentioned, participate in systems that destroy. They work for Forest Service, claim to protect wilderness. Yet their paychecks come from government that subsidizes clear-cutting, mining, oil extraction. They feed me while their species devours the world. They are complicit even in their kindness. And if the best humans are still complicit, then there are no innocent humans. Only participants in collective suicide who vary in their awareness of what they're doing. We cannot save them. We can only save the world from them. This is the choice we face. This is the choice we've made. We read that entry and understood. This wasn't insurgency. This was mercy killing on species scale. They'd judged humanity, found us guilty of ecocide, sentenced us to forced reduction, and convinced themselves it was necessary, moral, the only way to save Earth from the virus that humanity had become. The truly terrifying revelation. They're right. Not morally. We can't accept that genocide is justified even for preservation. But factually, they're right about human behavior. Right about our trajectory. Right about the damage we're causing. Right about our inability to change despite knowing better. Right about the collapse we're creating. Right that we're taking most of Earth's life with us. They've watched us for decades, documented our behavior with scientific precision, reached conclusions based on evidence, and those conclusions are: humans are destroying Earth, won't stop voluntarily, can't be reasoned with, and must be stopped by force before the damage becomes irreversible. We spent 20 years thinking we were protecting an endangered species. We were actually providing intelligence to beings who decided our species was the real danger, who decided that protecting Earth required reducing human population and infrastructure by any means necessary, who'd planned systematic attack on human civilization and were waiting for optimal moment to execute. The 2008 incidents were just a test. Phase 4 is coming. Maybe 2030. Maybe 2040. Whenever conditions are right. Whenever humanity is most vulnerable. Whenever coordinated infrastructure attacks will cause maximum collapse with minimum recovery capability. And the most terrifying part, we can't warn anyone effectively. Can't provide evidence that will be believed. Can't trigger preparation or prevention. The beings planning this have studied human psychology well enough to know that warnings will be dismissed, that evidence will be rationalized away, that even people who half believe will prioritize comfortable denial over uncomfortable action. Sequa knew we'd find his journals, knew we'd try to warn people, knew we wouldn't be believed. Counted on it. Made our discovery and our failed warnings part of his plan. We're not just failures. We're accomplices. Tools used and discarded. Proof that even well-intentioned humans ultimately serve the destruction they claim to oppose. We're 71 now. Dying. This testimony is our final attempt to warn anyone who will listen. The evidence exists. The plan exists. The threat is real. And Phase 4 is approaching. Believe us or don't. Investigate or don't. Prepare or don't. But know this. We protected Bigfoot for 20 years. And we discovered too late that we were helping plan the end of human civilization. That's the revelation, that's what terrifies us. Not that they exist. Not that they're intelligent. But that they've watched us long enough to conclude we're irredeemable. And they're preparing to do something about it.